Okay, everybody, it's about that time. We'll go ahead and get started. So I am Brian with SMMware, and with me is Brenda.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm delighted to be here, and I'm an accredited SMMware trainer, and I will be back on at the end of Brian's talk, so we can chat some more.
Very good. And what we're looking at right now is the 4 tracks that we're going to be covering today. SMMware is divided into 4 major areas of functionality. In the blue area, we're going to walk through what it's like to add a client and work with sales leads, to create jobs, entering your hours and expenses, working with invoices and file management. And then we have a second section in green about organizations and contacts. Our third section is about calendars and task notes and calls. And we're going to talk a little bit about marketing automation today as well, and also our integrations with Quickbooks and Google Calendar and Mailchimp. This is where we're going to start, in the area in blue, working with clients. Here we are on the home page. In order to add a new client, we go to Clients and Sales and Manage Clients. The fields that are mandatory are marked with a red asterisk. In this case, it's just the first name and last name. To point out a few of the other fields that are in the client profile. Instead of having just one field where you indicate where the business has come from, we've got 3. And the category is meant to be the most coarse idea. It could be something like real estate, or sometimes it could be like your online website. We have a company field, which is for the name of the company, like Smith Realty, and then person field, it could be Jane Doe at Smith Realty. By the way, you can ask questions in the chat area, or you can use there's a question section where it'll keep track of questions, which ones have been answered, which allows me to make sure that I don't skip anybody. Whereas the chat room, sometimes it can kind of scroll by a little quickly. All right, so moving on. We also have a field here for whether someone is willing to act as a reference. And we have an area for client representatives. So in the case of, say, an estate job, then you might have an attorney with a power of attorney, and they would be entered here. And you can indicate the nature of the relationship here, such as attorney. We also offer some custom fields where you assign the label of your choice, and then you can collect information about that particular client. Within SMMware, the idea of the client profile is that they could be a current client or a past client, but you can also think of them as a potential client. So for a sales lead, this is actually the first stop in the process as well. We don't want to duplicate information like first name and last name and cell phone number. So there's really just one place we want to have that. One of the areas that is useful for senior move managers is the idea of pre-filling the address. This is a list of senior living centers that you might be working with. And by picking one, it fills out the entire address for you. So you just enter Suite 304 or something like that. And then you hit save. Brenda, I was going to mention if you could put yourself on mute for now. And moving on, for the sales opportunities, we start here with the client. Someone calls you up and you create a quick client profile. All you have to do is the first name and last name. However, when that's done, you move on to, say, create sales lead. And we have the status levels for the sales lead. This is actually a customizable list. So if you don't go off of these particular labels, then we can accommodate whatever your process is. Here's a place where you can indicate what kind of work you think it's going to be, whether it's estate clean out or move only or whatever it might happen to be. That list is also customizable. And again, we have custom fields here as well. There's actually 28 of them, and we're only showing the first row. This system is configured for the first row to show, but we could uncover the others if we wanted to make use of them. So this is the sales lead profile, and it's a place where you collect information about the sale that is separate from the actual quote. So if you think about the sales process, you collect information. It could be their address that they're moving to. And it could also include files that you want to upload. If you take photos during the sales process, SMMware does have a spot where you can upload those. Take a brief look at what it's like to upload photos. You'll notice that these photos all have the long random file names that you would see coming from a phone. And we'll talk about that more in a moment. You'll notice that I can do the multi-select. This also works for mobile devices. For Renee, answering your question, under admin and then referral report, that is where you can make use of the referral fields from the client profile. Returning back to our file uploads, we have already selected the files, and SMMware allows you to add a tag. The underlying thinking is that you would walk into a room, take a number of, say, all right, we took these in bedroom 1 or bedroom 2, etc. For Renee, I'm just going to jump over to the client. I'm just going to answer your question, jump over to the client profile. Is this what you meant? You want to know where the referral fields are? Let me know if that's what you meant, but this is the location where this is where you input the referral field information, and then the referral report is where you make use of it. So you can use, after you've made some entries into the referral fields, those entries get stored in this drop-down, and you can pick them by clicking here. For Miguel, the system works on a tablet, and you can also upload photos from the tablet, or the same is true for a phone. This is SMMware is a website, even when you're on a mobile device, so you do not have to go to the mobile or the App Store or the Google Play Store. You just go to the website URL, and we also advise people to create an icon on their desktop so that it's easy to get in and behaves much like an app. For Jay, yes, it absolutely does work on Android devices as well. All right, coming back to our photo upload, we're saying that we took all these photos in the bedroom, and going back to the idea of the long file names, we're going to use the auto rename feature, and the end result will be photos named bedroom 1 and then sequentially 001, 002, and so on. So that gets you away from the long random file names. So here you can see bedroom 1, 001, and so on and so forth. And here within the file manager, there's an area to take notes. So if you want to indicate that a certain piece of furniture is going to be donated, things like that. We also have a restricted file manager, and this is a place where you could upload a signed PDF of a contract, things like that. The regular team members will have access to the regular file manager. They will not have access to the restricted file manager. All right, so this is our sales profile, and again, this is about information above and beyond the quote. And I'll briefly show you what it looks like to work with the actual quoting function. For Darla, I would have to take a look at, you're talking about Excel docs, and we could take a closer look at that afterwards, but the file manager should work fine with image files and PDFs, Word docs, and Excel files. I'm going to go ahead and create a quote. Within SMMware, you can create some templates and then load a quote from the templates. And the estimates within SMMware are a question of working with the various blocks that we provide for you. This is a client block, and here's a header block. So it's just got the bold, large text, and it's a way of structuring the documents. In this case, we've created a document that's divided up into move day, or pre-move, move day, and then post-move. But again, this is just the template that we created, and you can have yours work in whatever fashion you like. The gray areas are where the figures are being set, and then you can modify pretty much anywhere else. Other text or other blocks that you can put into your quote are text blocks. This is a summary block, and then we have a block for legal language. I'm going to go ahead and save that. And then after it's saved, you can create a PDF. This is what your client will see. And of course, your header image will be custom to your site. And SMMware also includes the idea of multiple versions of a quote. So if you, within the same sales opportunity. So if somebody calls you up and says, hey, I got your quote, and it looked pretty good, but now we actually want to add some more effort. So then you come back and you say, all right, I'm going to, it says quote 1 right there. I'm going to say copy and save. Now it says quote 2. And I can write myself a note. As you can see, this is private. It's not going to be part of what the client can see. So again, you can, the main point here is that you do not see anything about our private note on the finished quote. Also, if I had entered an email address for this client, this button would be active. And clicking on that, you would be sending an email to the client with the PDF as an attachment for the quote. Within the sales area, I'm going to return to the listing of the sales opportunities. We have what is essentially a sales report. Right now, it's telling us that we've got some that are in progress and some quotes that are submitted, and that's based on our filter, because those are what we consider current. But I can say all and filter that. And now our sales report is going to show you a lot more information about what's at the various levels, so prospecting. The inquiry level is meant for people who casually call you and they just want to figure out if they're in the right ballpark, but they're probably not going to be ready to go for a few months, things like that. And you can see the totals for the quotes that are in the listing. And it's basically, you can also use the filtering at the top, and it's basically a sales report for you. And we're going to go back to, let's take a look here. When you have won the work, you can create a job from the sales quote, and that tells SMMware that your job is related to a specific quote, and that comes in handy for the profitability report that we offer. The information that, or some of the information that you had entered into the sales opportunity will carry over, like the custom fields and the job type. You can set a team lead. So the job definition is where it's basically a bucket where we can attribute all the hours. Over time, you may work with the same client multiple times, and you want a way of separating the hours for the last time versus the hours for this time. And the bucket that goes into is the job. So from here, we're going to go ahead and look at what it's like to enter hours. You pick the job and the date. Put in the start and end time. We also do have a configuration option where you simply put in the total hours. So instead of putting 1:30 to 4, we would just have a field to put 2.5. You can mark whether this is not billable. You can either enter a description by hand typing whatever you care to, or you can use a pre-designed set of terms. This is also configurable. And you can also make more than one entry at a time. So if you worked on one job in the morning, one job in the afternoon, you do not have to repeat the process from scratch. You can still do it from the one screen. And since I'm an administrator, I can pick who I'm entering hours on behalf of. Whereas if I was a regular team member, of course, then you would just be entering your own hours. For Elizabeth, then regarding personalizing the quote, the quotes do come with a client block that is, let's find where I was, just do this. So there's a client block where it's going to pull in the information for that particular client. So that's one aspect of personalization. But I'm guessing you might also mean that you want to modify the quote generally. So you can delete entire blocks. You can rearrange blocks. So yes, absolutely. This is just a template, and it's meant as a starting place so that you can get most of the way there in one go. So the kind of templates that you have could be small, medium, large jobs, or it could be this is an estate job, or this is a downsize and move job. So how you arrange your templates is up to you. But once you've loaded a template into a quote, you can modify it however you like. So hopefully that answers your question. For Melanie, let's see, you have, so it sounds like you have created a job where you indicated that it was going to use job codes, but you don't have job codes set up. So I think the first question is we'll have to talk about whether you need job codes. And if you do, then we'll have to set them up. And if you don't need job codes, then you just want to be sure to create jobs that don't call for them. And I think we'd probably have to go into a little more detail. So we would probably want to talk separately after the webinar. But the bottom line is your jobs are probably calling for job codes, and you just don't have any defined yet. So the next thing we'll talk about is entering your expenses. And it works in much the same way. You have to indicate the date of the expense and the job, the amount the money was spent with as a vendor. If you spent money using the company credit card, you can leave the radio button set for company. If you paid out of pocket, and that means that the employee needs to be reimbursed, then you'd pick the reimbursable radio button. I would also like to mention that throughout SMMware, there are these question marks, which if you put your mouse over them and just hover, you don't click, you just hover, it will have a tooltip pop up that provides more information about that particular setting. Also, you can mark this as not being billable, and you can upload receipts. And you can, again, type in a description, or you can pick from a predefined list of phrases. For Suzanne about mileage, do you want to customize the cost? So going back to the hours, if you're going to enter miles, there's not really any customization that is done on this screen regarding the entering of miles, but there is a place in the settings editor. And if you're working with SMMware, then you're going to become very familiar with the settings editor. This is where you go to make all your configuration choices, just about all of them. And the mileage pay is under bonus and travel pay. And here's mileage charges. And here's where you can set how many miles somebody has to go before they get any pay, and what they get paid per mile after that, or kilometers if you are not in Canada or Australia. For Miguel, there are not integrations with payroll services directly. We do offer some assistance with that insofar as you can generate a payroll report. And I'll just go ahead and leave the dates blank. It's going to be long. And after you have the payroll report, you can export it to generate a CSV file. Suzanne, you're quite welcome. All right, so we left off looking at the hours. I believe that we were done there. So from here, I'm going to go to look at the invoicing. I went to admin and then the invoice manager to come here. And let's take a look at one that's already done. To generate an invoice, it's a question of setting I'm going to roll this back to preliminary for a moment. So you can set a start date and end date. The idea here is that if you have a longer job and you need to send out multiple invoices for it, say one every month, then you have a date range, and you tell the system to look for any line items, and it's pulling in hours and expenses here. And you can create adjustments, and you can account for deposits. If the client has more than one address in the system because they're moving, then you'll have this drop down where you can pick which address to send the invoice to. If there is a client representative, their address will also be here. And if you pick that, it will also say care of so-and-so. Also notice that the text descriptions are editable from this screen. The idea is that your employees may not have been perfectly clear in what they did, and you might want to clean it up a little bit. So therefore, we let you go ahead and modify these. And we also have status levels for an invoice. When you first begin one, it's considered preliminary, and this is a way for you to tell other people on the team that this is really just a scratch pad and you don't want them doing anything like sending it out to the client at this time. And we also include a feature for team leads to approve the invoices. The underlying thinking is that they were the ones on site. They know which employees did the work and what work was done. So we allow them to approve invoices. As an administrator, I can just skip right to marking this as being team leader approved. And once things are approved, the idea here is that you're probably done with modifying aspects of the invoice because it is in fact approved. And now we offer you some buttons for PDFs. SMMware takes that same information that we saw on the web page and presents it in 3 different ways. This is the summary version. And the thinking here is that if you have a client who might push back more if they see a longer invoice, then you can give them the summary version. We also offer a detailed version. This one breaks out the work on a day-by-day basis, and if there's more than one employee who did work on a given day, then you'll have a line item for each of those. However, for a longer job, the detailed version can get overly long, and in that case, we offer you the roll-up version, where on any given day, there will only be one line item, and it'll say how many employees did work on that day, and give you the sum total of the hours. So this generates a shorter invoice. For Melanie, the invoice manager does integrate with Quickbooks, and so you can create the invoice in SMMware and then copy it to Quickbooks. There's a button here, Quickbooks Online Add or QBO Add, that will copy over what is essentially the detailed version of the invoice to Quickbooks. So SMMware does not actually work with money. So in order for you to accept payment online from your client, then you can copy this over to Quickbooks and let them pay online via Quickbooks. And we'll talk more about those sort of things later on in the webinar when we talk about our integrations in more detail. For J, there is not an invoice that is built off of the quote. What we have is the summary version, the detailed version, and the roll-up version. And we also pull our hours from actual entries by the employees as opposed to what the hours were estimated to be or what the calendar shows as the expected time for a given day's events. So we're generating those invoices off of the actual entries. So this is our invoice manager. And this does bring us to the end of our first track. We've talked about clients, talked about sales leads, jobs, entering the hours and expenses, and we've talked about invoices and files. From here, we're going to touch on the organizations and contacts section within SMMware. We can go to the main menu. The organizations are considered to be the actual companies, and the contacts are the people who work for those companies. we do divide up your entries based on the categories, and your categories are completely customizable as well. Here's where you can indicate what that category is. We collect the usual information about the address and so on. For Darla, the closed job is this is regarding the job status, going back to jobs. The closed job is when you have essentially boxed everything up and put it on the back shelf, and you don't expect to look at it again for 6 months or a year or maybe never. Work completed means that you don't expect anybody to be going out to the home. You know, like everything's unpacked and you've cleaned up and walked away. So the work is complete, but you have not yet completed the invoicing. You haven't done any customer reviews. And so there's a few more things before the job is truly closed and over and done with. So hopefully that answers your question for you, Darla. Going back to the organization manager. An organization can be marked as being a vendor, and that affects whether they are going to appear when you record expenses as a vendor. And we also have a file manager down here. We'll go into more detail about tasks, notes, and calls in a little bit, but we did want to point out that you have these functionalities here as well. So a typical usage for this is a senior living center gives you a PDF for all their standard floor plans. And this is the logical place for everybody to go looking for that information. So you just go to that organization, you put it up under their file manager, and then everyone should be able to find it okay. We're going to create a contact for this organization. I won't fill out all of the information, but you can see that they are already associated with the organization that we just came from. If they act as a client rep, then you might want to check this box. That is applicable usually for attorneys is the most common place where they can act as someone's going to act as a client representative or a family member. If this is somebody who sends business to you, so maybe this is the marketing director at a senior living center, then you mark that they are referring business to you, and we're going to tie that information into somewhere a little bit more later. So the fact that they refer business to you and the date that you last spoke to them drives some other functionality. I can go back and look at their organization. And now that we've created the contact, we can see how we can get back to them as well. I'd also like to touch on the search bar while we're in the neighborhood organizations. The search results are divided up into records from the client area, from your organizations, and from your contacts. So that way there's really no confusion about whether someone comes back in the search results, whether they're a client or just a contact. All right, so that's our shortest section about organizations and contacts. From here, we're going to talk about tasks, notes, and calls, and then calendars, the yellowish section. Let's start off back at a job. Go down to the tasks section. And you can see we already have 4 tasks in place for this particular job. I'm going to go ahead and add a new one. We're going to give it a due date. I can set a couple of reminder emails and also a priority. I can assign it to someone. So this will be about setting up the cutoff dates for utilities. And John would have gotten an email informing them that they have a new task. So we come back and we can see that we've got our new task here. We have a button that lets you see all the tasks in full so that you can review them easily. So this is a convenient way of doing that. Whereas here you just see the summary bar. So after you've worked with the system for a while and you've been entering the tasks, you notice that you're creating the same kind of tasks over and over again, and you start to wonder if there is a way to work with multiple tasks at one time. And the answer is yes. We have something called task groups. And these are these individual buttons each represent more than one task. And when I click on one of them, I will get 1, 2, 3 tasks in this case, or however many you have set up. This is also configurable. And this helps with consistency in a couple of different ways. First of all, the language will be consistent because it's been pre-signed, and then you can modify it as needed. It is also going to help you with consistency because if you have, say, 5 to 10 tasks for a given section, then maybe you don't need some of those tasks and you can just eliminate them. I'll just click on the X to get rid of that. Whereas if you're trying to add the tasks one at a time and you've got 10 of them, then maybe you will forget one of them. Or you have to have a separate list that you use to help you remember. So this approach means that they're all presented to you and you can get rid of the ones you don't want. For Renee, the tasks and task groups are all configurable, again, from the settings editor. I've jumped over to another tab. This is found under admin and then settings. And our task group presets are down here in item 17. And that is where I could add a new task group which would include a task of invoice client. So now I've jumped back to our job and I'm going to finish up talking about tasks and just talk about notes. Notes are actually simpler than tasks. It just consists of a summary and a text body or description. This particular one has some preset text that is intended to be a daily report. And this means that there are some headings that indicate to your employees what kind of information you want to collect. You can do things like ask for client feedback or what kind of mood the client was in if things went well. Was the client pleased? And if the headings that are here don't apply to the note that I'm wanting to create now, I can just get rid of them. It's really just kind of a suggestion, and you don't have to follow it precisely. The notes within SMMware do keep track of who created the note and when they created it. That way you'll know who to talk to if there's some question about a note. And if one note kind of supersedes another because it has a later date, that'll help avoid confusion if a couple of sections contradict each other. Or at the very least, you'll know who to ask. And we also have a button here as well where you can see all the notes that have been written. So you can quickly scan through it. We also have our calls, which function a lot like the tasks. So you have a date when you're expecting to make the call. You can also use this to record calls that happened in the past. For a call that happened in the past, you don't need to worry about reminders, and you don't really need to worry about whether they're calling you or you're calling them. But you do need the phone number. And of course, you can assign it to people. From here, I'm going to jump to our home page. This is what we call the daily snapshot. It's your dashboard, and it has a variety of information. Because I'm an administrator, I have some sections that would not appear to a normal team member. This is called the status board for operations, or ops. This is about your ongoing jobs. And you can write yourself notes about how it's going. The idea is that at the end of the day, this is your 30,000-foot view, and you can see that while these projects are going well, and or maybe your team lead might have made an entry, and you can see that, okay, this is 3 cases where I probably want to take some time and pay attention to them right away. We have another status board for your sales operations. These labels are completely configurable. So this one is using an approach that's hot lead, medium lead, cold lead, but you can have more tags, fewer tags, different labels, whatever you want, and colors. Touching on tasks, this is a list of tasks that have been assigned to me, whether I created them and assigned it to myself or someone else created it. It would appear here. It goes across the entire system and gathers them together in one place. So I can see what sort of things are on my plate for the day. And if I've created some tasks and assigned it to somebody else, they are being delegated to someone else. So we have this section, My Tasks Delegated. If a task is running late, it's in red so that it helps stand out for you. Also, as an administrator, I have a list of all the unfinished tasks in the system, regardless of whether I created them or whether they're assigned to me, just everything. And if a task was recently completed, I have access to that. There's also a section for my calls. I mentioned before that invoices can be approved by team leads. And this is the spot where the team leads would go and see that, okay, now there's an invoice, but it is not yet approved, so I better go take a look at it. SMMware also has an optional feature for approving the hourly and expense entries. And if I'm a team lead, then there will be a list of entries here that I need to review and approve. If I am a team member and a team lead has rejected one of my entries, it'll appear here. So I can review it, modify it, and resubmit it to the system. And then we have a couple of sections that just help you keep in mind what teams you are part of as the team lead and which ones you're part of as just a team member. We mentioned that your contacts can be referring business to you, and this section will take a list of everybody who's referring business to you. It'll take the date of last contact, and it'll show you the ones where it's been the longest. So we're probably in okay shape with Joan, because it hasn't been that long since we've spoken. But with Judy, we haven't spoken since May. It's probably about time to touch base with her. We want to avoid a situation where somebody's angry at you, that they stop sending you business, and then you're so busy you don't even notice. And by the time you talk to them, they're also mad about that. We also have sections for when the client is willing to act as a reference. That was part of the client profile, whether they're willing to. And we also have some clients where you have not yet asked them, but the job is over, so you can work through this list, talk to them, and then use that to keep the first list fresh. And that brings us down to the My Schedule section. The homepage has a calendar with items that are just for me. So these are events where I am either the attendee or the event main contact. I'm going to jump to the master calendar. Whereas the homepage calendar only has the events that I am part of, but not every event in the company, the master calendar does in fact have everything company-wide. Let's start down here at the bottom with the set of tags. And the idea behind the tags is to let you use color to tell you something about the events as you scan through the calendar visually. So there's 3 different ways that we've seen people use these tags the most commonly. So if you want to, you can distinguish between an event that's part of sales versus one that's part of an ongoing job. So we've set up 2 tags, one for jobs, one for sales. So that one's brown, okay, that's sales. This one's green, so therefore it's part of an ongoing job. And that's probably the simplest approach. Another approach is to basically take this job tag and break it up into multiple tags based on the kind of work being done. And so we've got tags here for a pack event and an unpack event. So that's purple and the darker green. There's some examples right there. And another way you can use these tags is based on the team lead for that day. So for instance, if we have 3 people who act as team leads when they go on site for an event, then we could say that Judy has a tag, Carmen has a tag, Margot has a tag, and then you could look through the calendar and say, okay, so that's clearly Judy, and that is Carmen, that one's from Margot. All right, so let's go ahead and look at what it's like to create an event. Go out here to the 3rd. SMMware has 3 different ways of managing your attendees. We're going to look at those in more detail in just a second, but first I'm going to go ahead and assign a tag. And I'm going to say that this particular event is associated with a job. This list reflects all the tags that we saw in the main view. And these are also customizable since the tags are customizable. Now, since this event is part of a job, we can then indicate which client or which job is involved. And because we've indicated which job it's part of, now the system knows the addresses, the address that they are moving from and the address that they're moving to. And when you see this, you just have to mainly leave it alone. And when we get back to the main view, you will see that this is going to be turned into a link for a calendar or for a mapping function. I'm going to make someone else be the main contact. So when the attendees get their notifications, if they have questions, it's going to say to contact John in this case. So going back to the idea of how you manage who the attendees are going to be, we have the direct approach, invite, and availability. Each one of these has its own way of thinking. For the direct approach, the thought is that you've already spoken offline, so to speak, maybe on the drive home or during a company meeting. So you don't really need SMMware to help you figure out who's going to work on the event. You just want to formalize it. You want to get that information into the system. And when the employees get their notifications, it's not going to have anything about do you not want to work on this event. This is more of an assignment situation. On the other hand, if you do want SMMware to help you figure out who's going to work on a given event, then we have an invite-based approach. And this allows for some back and forth. They're going to get emails and text messages saying, this is a new event. Are you interested in working on it? And then they're going to respond. This is not like a party at your house where you invite 10 people and maybe 7 people show up, maybe 8. It's more a case where you need 3 people to do this work, and you want exactly 3, not 2, not 4. So we do have a phase where you, after people express their interest, then you pick which ones you actually want to assign to the event. There's a couple different ways you can use the event-based or the invite-based approach. There's the first come, first serve, where anybody after the team is full, people get a message saying, I'm sorry, the team is full. And there's also an approach for multiple rounds of invitations. So that way you invite who you really want based on trying to spread the work around, or somebody has a special skill. And then if not all of them can do it, then you can continue to add more people. I'm going to move on to the availability approach, which is our fanciest one. Under this approach, this approach is different than the first 2. They are considered client-driven because the first step is to talk to the client and agree on a date. And then after that, the second step is to work with your employees to fill in those slots. This third approach can be thought of as being employee-driven because the first step is for the employees to indicate when they can and cannot work. So they do that through this command, and they can simply, I'm going to go into the next week rather than add events to the past. But I'm going to say, all right, for next week on Friday, I cannot work in the morning. So all I do is click and hold and drag on down, and it creates an entry for me. And if I grab the wrong day, I can just move it over to Thursday. And if I meant to say something like 3 o'clock, I can just drag it out. And if I was just altogether mistaken, I can click on it and get rid of it. So it's pretty straightforward for the employees to enter when they can and cannot work. Coming back here, we have a list of the employees. And in this case, Rachel has indicated that she cannot work in the morning. So her green available bar skips the morning. So I'm going to go ahead and assign Sally, Nisa, and Marion. And this approach allows you to create shifts. The other 2 approaches assume that everybody is arriving and leaving at the same time. And this approach allows you to record that people are arriving and leaving at different times. And I'm going to go ahead and skip notifications since I don't want a bunch of emails to go out. Under normal circumstances, I would want the employees to be notified. And then after the assignment phase, come back here, and now you've got this purple bar. It says assigned. And the next question, of course, is what happens when things change, as they always do. So let's say that Sally calls in and she can't make this event anymore for whatever reason. So not only can she not be in this event, she clearly won't be joining any other events for the company at that time frame. So I'm going to click on this, and it's going to turn blue and say released. And when I click on saved, you're going to see that she has a gap in her time. Now, on the other hand, if the client calls you up and says, you know what, I can't find the keys to the storage shed, you can't do the work in the storage shed today. So instead of needing 4 people now, you just need 3. So we're going to say, all right, well, Nisa's not going to be part of this event anymore. So I will click on this one time. In this case, Nisa could be part of some other event. She's not herself unavailable. She's just not needed for this event. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this a second time, and that chunk will be rolled back into the overall available time. I'm going to go ahead and click Save. So now we can see that Sally is indeed not available anymore. And we can see that Nisa is available. We could put her right back on this event if we wanted to, but it probably wouldn't make sense to do so. And that's our 3 approaches. We've got, again, direct, invite, and availability. So from here, I'd like to talk about the Mailchimp integration. We have an integration with Mailchimp, which is an email marketing tool, and it has something called marketing automation. And this allows you to send out timed emails. Within Mailchimp, they are called customer journeys. And you can use these in a variety of ways. After you start a new job, you can send the client a sequence of emails, say 1 day, 1 week, and 2 weeks afterwards, and they can you can keep in touch with them. You can remind them about things that they have to do. After you do an in-person seminar, say at a senior living center, you can collect email addresses, enter them here, and then follow up with a sequence of emails there as well. SMMware also uploads the clients for, let's see, contacts. There. And it will upload tags, which are then used to refine your email list. So if you've got a list of, say, a couple hundred entries, and some of them are past clients, some of them are current clients, maybe you want to hit up the past clients to let them know that some sort of deal is going to be happening. For your current clients, you maybe want to give them a mass email about something that's going to be coming up. Or your sales leads, you might want to contact just them. So use these tags to refine your list and narrow down the recipients to only certain ones. You can do that for the clients, which again is your past, current, and potential clients. And you can also do that for contacts, which is from the contacts section in SMMware. So this would be real estate agents you know, or the director of marketing of senior living center. So you can use their tags to refine your email to them as well. So for instance, I could pick only people who are in real estate, or I could pick only people who refer business to you, things like that. And I'm going to touch on our integration with Quickbooks. There's a variety of entities that you can copy over to Quickbooks, starting with clients, associates, vendors, but you can also copy over hourly entries. And SMMware is smart enough to know that if the hourly entry includes a new client, it'll copy over the client before it copies over the actual hourly entry. And you can copy over individual entries, but the most common practice is to set a date range, probably equal to the payroll period, and then use the button QBO add all to move them all over at once. And we have a similar arrangement in QuickBooks Desktop. In that case, you're adding things to a queue. You go back to your QuickBooks Desktop and you use the Update Web Services and bring down any items that were put into the queue there. That particular arrangement is for security. And it's provided by QuickBooks. It prevents you from having to share your personal workstation, have it exposed to the internet where hackers can come knocking on your door. So from here, I'd like to touch on or to hand things over to Brenda to talk a little bit about implementation. And then we have a few more things to say before we wrap up. So Brenda, I believe you're on. You should be able to be heard now.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Brian. Well, that was lots of information. And I did incorporate SMMware into my business the last 2 years before I sold it, and I must say that it certainly cleaned up my office, and it was just great to be able to do everything online, and it did help me sell as well. So the only suggestion, that really comes to mind for me is that there's a lot to learn with SMMware, but I think it's really important just to get started with your active clients and just get them in and start that way. And then you have lots of time to build on that. I'm here for you. I can just work remotely for you in Toronto, Canada. So I'm not far away, of course, nowadays with virtual. And, we can certainly start off small or just answer wherever you are in the program and the software and just deal with your questions.
All right, very good. Everybody, I'm going to be sharing a document with you about migration tips, and it provides some advice about going through the implementation process and the software adoption process. You'll find that in the chat area, and you can download that. So we had a question from Darla. We do have a YouTube channel. If you go to youtube.com/SMMware, you will see that we do, in fact, have quite a few videos here. And we'll be posting a replay of this webinar here, but we also have topic-specific YouTube videos here as well. Here we have for instance, here's the Google Calendar integration setup YouTube. Here's one about how to put the icon on your desktop for an Android device, and sales estimates and so on and so forth. So for Elizabeth, as far as importing data, then that is something that you would work with Brenda as part of a training package to set up and import the data from an existing CRM. So SMMware can work with CSV files from pretty much any program. Typically, whether it's HubSpot or Insightly and so on. For Jay, we do not integrate directly with Microsoft calendars, just Google Calendar at this time. So a few more things. We have the manuals for SMMware on our corporate site here under manuals. Sorry, it's under company and then manuals. And for anybody who's interested in more information, we have our pricing and sign-up sheet here. This explains that you get up to 10 active users for the $45 US per month. We have our various other levels. It only goes up a little bit as you add more users. There's the first 30 days free. There is no annual contract and no setup fee. So that more or less wraps up the topics that we wanted to cover for today. If anybody has any questions now, I'd be happy to answer them. And if some questions come up later, then by all means, you can contact me at.
And I welcome everyone to go to my website. It's brconsulting.ca. And I am just a phone call away if you want to chat.
And that information is also in the handout that I posted with the migration tips. That information is at the bottom.
Great.
And so here is the main phone number here. And of course, the main website is SMMware.com. So thank you very much for your time. I hope you found this informative. For Jay, the addresses, we do have Canadian configuration or Australian. So it's basically either US or metric, so kilometers versus miles, postal code versus zip code, and so on. Mm-hmm. So yes, we do have Canadian clients and an Australian client. So again, I thank you for your time, and any follow-up questions, feel free to contact us. And everybody have a great rest of the day. Okay, bye.
Thanks. Now. Bye.